Can you say a little bit about yourself? And then we will get into modes of collaboration and exchange, that have developed between you all.
I started a long back, but for a long time I wasn't like able to practice seriously my work, and not till 2012. Then slowly things happened. I was more focused on painting, but later slowly shifted to textile. Then understanding that performance is so important for my practice. And in 2007, I think 17, I took a residency at Lasana here in Nepal. So I think that was like a turning point in my. And then I got to meet Ryan. She was doing a show here. She was here on Fulbright, so she was working on a project. We decided that I would do the textile installation for her work, in which Sonam was working also, and Irina was co-curating that project. So that's how we met. And then after 2017, in 2018, this Photo Kathmandu open call happened, and then I always had in mind that I would like to work with Sonam and Irina one day. So I think that is where it all started.
So I went to study filmmaking in Canada, like in Vancouver, 2011. But then throughout my undergrad period, I like shifted around a lot because the filmmaking was way too, I don't know, commercial, industrialized for me, and I couldn't like articulate that to myself. So that just resulted in me hopping around. Ended up learning a lot about basically what they call visual culture and performance studies while I was doing a little bit of filmmaking of my own. And then I came back to Nepal. So I was trying to do that, drifting, working on music, writing, and that's around that time I met Ryan, and I was already interested in what she was doing, especially with the body, dance, performance, and then collaborating with different women, and like just having a very experimental and open-ended process. I was really interested and excited by that, and thankfully she approached me to work on it, and I was like, yeah. And that's how I got to know Keepa and Sonam. Yeah, and by the end of it all, like when we had the exhibition and the performance, like the whole process was so special. After a long time, I felt like, oh, I'm part of something really interesting, and I grew with it. And then Keepa and Sonam were a part of it. So like when Keepa approached me and Sonam, I was very excited to do something together again.
And for me, my journey could be more about photo and videos. I think it's about a year I completed my bachelor in media and communication. So my courses are more focused on journalism and filmmaking. This photo as a medium to express myself came more, clearer when I was still doing my bachelor. I got an opportunity to work with National Geographic photographers. So at that period, I met Ryan as well. That's how we all got connected. And I think Islands of Our Bodies for me was, I think, through that period also, it gave me the opportunity to understand those things about bodies and everybody's aspect. And that gave me a series of period where I was exploring myself to understand what it is it like to, photograph, women and then bodies and those,
So I think one of the things that would be nice for our viewers is if one of you could actually tell us what Islands of Our Bodies is, and then also what your process of working as a collective is, who does what, and how do you guys collaborate?
Islands of Our Bodies still is a result of Sonam, Keepa, and myself thinking about how we could portray and explore the body and its different facets, its different worlds, its different possibilities by combining different mediums, particularly Keepa's performance and textile work, Sonam's photography and video work, and with me, it was, I think, primarily sound and text and like just conceptualizing. With this project, I think we really wanted to shift the discussion from the external female body to something that goes internal and external, some kind of like a movement, as opposed to a fixed way of viewing and discussing bodies in general. So we really wanted to expand the ways that we could approach, both for ourselves and for our viewers as well, when it comes to the body and all the links that it can form, you know, whether it's conceptual or sensorial or imaginative or internal, external. And then we took that forward and we started exploring what was personal and genuine among our experiences. There was a point where we even talked to other women, which was a small part of the project, but then that also informed our process. So that was the first manifestation, where we worked with photos and soundscapes and sound installations, textile installations, and recorded performances in a house, in a residential house, where the different rooms were a part of the design that we had to work with to show our exhibition. That was the first manifestation.
We really wanted to show the reality, you know, bring out the emotions, I guess, the relatable, non-relatable, but really understanding our own memories, like our own collective or individual histories, like Irina said. So we just brought it out together and we questioned a lot ourselves. And we basically, the process was answering those questions, you know.
And I think in terms of like something that was explicitly political for, I think, all three of us, was how we were determined not to censor the skin and the body and in any way. In this part of the world, when we often talk about women and their bodies, a certain, I don't know, establishments wanted to be expressed in a more palatable way, in a more acceptable way. For example, they'd rather have us have metaphorical discussions about the body rather than actually explicitly showing, different physically and visually showing the different parts of the body and how it could manifest into different other realms. So whenever someone tried to shift it to, maybe it's a bit too much, like why don't you put a rose instead, which was, so things at that point of time, it was very important for us to take a stance and say no, we're going to explore this in our own way. And even in terms of the stories that we talked about also, they're very personal and sensitive in nature, so it was a conscious decision to really put it out there from a very sensitive, inward-looking lens for others to actually see and absorb.
Thing was, we are very sure that the process, we wanted to understand the different way of understanding the discomfort from a different perspective, our new perspective, our own one, without conforming to any precondition.
I think there was a lot of tension between how we frame the stories, through what direction, because when we think about women or just bodies in general, and then when you are in Nepal, in Kathmandu specifically, I felt a certain pressure to really make it very social and very, something that would bring tangible social change, tangible psychological change and whatnot. So really focusing on the social aspect, which is important, but I think all three of us instinctively wanted to go inwards because we knew that new things could come out.
More so to fit in the society, to please someone else. Honestly, I never felt or had the desire to.
Individually, it would be nice to know your opinions on this, the role of the documentary, because it's certainly being stretched in different directions via your work, whether it be installation or performance.
It's just recently, actually, I was thinking about how important it has been in my work, especially the place of documentation. And I wasn't really exploring that aspect or really aware of it in the past. But when I go through my work, the journey, and how that has been like a space for me to study myself, my own work through documentation has been like really important now, I realize. And like you said, for me, documentation doesn't really have to be a certain binary. I'm interested in reality-based fantasy, like storytelling.
I think for me, now that I think about it, the idea of documentary became interesting in this process, the Islands of Our Bodies process, because when I looked at Sonam's work with Ryan, where she was actually capturing women working amongst each other, dancing amongst each other, and she was an outsider and she was capturing the process. And when we actually looked at the photographs that she had come up with, like, it was a documentation of different gestures that women were not, they didn't plan it, it was very instinctual, but then these gestures were documented and that became a big part of the exhibition. And then when we come to Islands of Our Bodies, which is a lot more personal and imaginative, I think. I think for me, the idea of documentary shifted to something where we came together and we genuinely asked each other questions and we answered them and reacted to them instinctively based on our personal experiences. And then we gathered them, listened, read, reflected, and that helped us, go forward. And the same thing happened with how Sonam and Keepa worked together. And it was just very private between Sonam and Keepa, right? And then I come later and I actually just see what they've come up with, just try to listen to these pictures and understand from my own perspective what happened. So it's like, it's a documentation of the process, and that kind of propels the imagination, and then you go with that, and it's like a constant loop.
What Irina mentioned about reflection, I think this is some documentations, but also an explorations of not only Keepa, but internal reflection into each person's what we were questioning each time what we were creating and coming up with our own understanding. So, sometimes I may be photographing Keepa, which I may be I may be looking through a perspective of a medium, and then there was a certain period where Irina asked me a questions to me, which was very, I never thought about it. I was just taking picture as an, observer. But when she asked me a questions about what do you, she asked me some personal questions about mountains and my body movements. And that made me realize, to ask myself how, as a woman, as a photographer, how do I view myself, and I think that gave me understanding to, to take pictures, through the understanding of each other's, what body and what women's means to ourselves.
That fantasy element, the imagination element, both in terms of performance and creation of images and sounds, I think that came very naturally to us, rather than like laboring and crafting different facets of this world that we were creating. Rather than that, it was very fluid, and that kind of expression came very naturally to us.
And so, Keepa, you mentioned that so your process was kind of asking questions of yourselves and then trying to answer them. So I was really curious about like what these questions were, and sort of what are some of these key insights or sort of ideas that have guided the manifestations that you've made. What are some sort of jewels that have come out of this process of inquiry?
Okay. When I said questions, I had my memories. I had some stories to tell, but I wanted to it came out of frustration. It came out of a lot of operations throughout the time, so that I was like in a coop. But the questions are like when Irina and I especially were like asking ourselves, and when I was playing with the camera, I mean with Sonam in front of the camera, that's when the questions arise, and those questions are more in my head. Like I don't know exactly how to pinpoint it, but what I came from, my stories are like, you know, like especially particularly there's one shot of her screaming. She's sitting down and there's a scream. So this one was like Irina had told, I had discussed about my like how I used to be like made fun of as a child growing up about my legs and all that, and how I have always been insecure and I've never shown really all throughout my life. So that was one of the memory, and we, you know, kind of change it into the certain different perspective looking at it.
The title, Islands of the Body, there's something so, on the one hand, it gives you a sense of the isolation, the individual that is implicated always, maybe in society, maybe in our thinking about where we are and what we're doing. But islands are also deeply connected to one another via passages. And it becomes a lovely metaphor for, I guess, not only the collective that has been established, but also as to, you know, how different islands, though separated by time and space, can come together to create a certain kind of a discussion and dialogue from time to time. Though they are islands, they can come together conceptually, imaginatively, metaphorically.
I think it was just a result of like our time together and us like just like feeling that, you know, like, okay, we are going to talk about a specifically personal experience, but we are excited to like put these personal worlds out there, you know, like with like this subconscious confidence that it will ring with people, it will connect with people, even though like we can't like explicitly say it, but we feel it. This was just like just us in like some like Google chat or whatever, like coming up thinking of like names, and you know, like someone says this, someone says that, someone says this, someone says that, and then like this popped up and everyone was like, yeah, okay.
I think we were thinking about the topic, but you know, and then I think Irina came up with how about islands, because at that period, while also I was taking pictures of Keepa, and then when we're under the process, and we're talking about different aspects of the bodies and the movement and everything, and then we realized, you know, I mean, our bodies, you know, our bodies are not just bodies. We have so many, you know, different parts of the bodies, you know, that different parts of the bodies could have a story to tell.
And I think when we really get down to the details, we were really like, fascinated by looking at the body as an actual landscape and see where that takes us. So that, I think that also informed bringing the idea of an island in and just like linking it with the body.
And it this connects to the sensory part, because we were referring to landscape and how landscape changes according to many aspects, like elements, as it comes in contact, same as with the body, you know. So we kind of refer to that.
I'm coming to the installation of your work, that it sort of reminded me of a poem by Wasaran Shire. I think it's called What We Did Yesterday Afternoon. It ends with this girl who's lying in bed, just about to fall asleep, and she has a globe, you know, in her hand. And as she's falling asleep, she's sort of dreaming at the same time. You know, she points to where she wants to go in the world. She keeps circulating this globe and points. And at one point of time, she starts asking the world a question. As she is pressing on different parts of this globe, where does it hurt? And the world sort of responds and says, everywhere. It hurts everywhere. Leading from that, I was, you know, curious about the first manifestation in the house and how you created different intensities at different parts of that space.
Right. So that house is a very old Newari structure. It has a specific kind of aura to it. And I know specifically, Irina and I had been working there prior. So we kind of I remember Irina telling me one time that she would want to do a sound installation throughout the whole house, because that's the kind of house that is very peculiar. We were very in touch with that house. We were analyzing like small structures, like how text could speak from certain space or the sound could come from another. So more than challenging, it was so exciting in a way. But having said that, the challenges were of course there. Like house is very delicate, being an old house. So to do the installations, you know, there are certain things that we had to keep in mind with. And similarly, I think Irina could say more about the sound installation. So these were the challenges. But, you know, we were in a very vast state of mind at that time, you know.
The house in itself, when you actually go inside it, there are so many little rooms, so many little cul-de-sacs, you know, that is a part of a very old tradition. For me personally, I go in there and then I'm a bit removed from that tradition because I'm not, you know, I'm kind of an outsider to the Newar architecture and Newar culture. So that really made this house even more fascinating to me because there were spaces and I didn't know why those spaces existed in the way that they did exist. That this is in terms of sound. Yeah, and this house has coming in, and that the diversity and the variety of how the spaces approached us really made it very easy for us to like react to it. And then see how it reflects our internal world and try to transpose that onto the house by working with the house. There's so many little details, like working with the wooden stairs, and you could see the back of the stairs so up close. Oh, why don't we put a small picture here and a little text here so that people are not just moving through the space, but then they're really looking into these little details of the house. It was just a matter of like thinking about what kind of mental and physical experience this house as a body is going through and how it wants to tell that experience to the listener. So while crafting the soundscapes, really you had to think of the house as a big, graceful body, which has a lot of stories and spaces. And the challenge was just like volume modulation and like seeing how you could like not make it like a harassment of sound, but actually weave it, like fine tune it into like a very curated sensorial experience.
What your thoughts were on the manifestation, right? When people came and saw what happened and what were the kind of relations, or even in the second one, at Look Stranger, were there things you observed after your job is done in this space and making this, sort of putting it out there? What happened after?
It was very interesting response. You know, I think art is supposed to be like that. Different generation of people reacting differently. And there was one woman, she sent a very nice message about how it made an impact. You know, she had been dealing with her body issues for a long time, and then the exhibitions gave an opportunity to, you know, to explore and then felt more. And there were so many people questioning it. And there was one which I got, there were some few couple of men who were viewing the video, and then I think, you know, there were a couple of few men I know, they were on the backside of it and said, why are they showing this? This is, you know, not to be seen something. I think the exhibition itself gave people a variety of things to what to be seen and what not to be seen, I think.
The owner of Kalu telling us about how some viewers were offended because of the weight issue, like how not to glorify, I forgot the word that is commonly used, but anyway. And at that time, it was, I was talking with you and I was like kind of offended right away. But then now looking back, then I see, okay, this is the reaction. So it is a good way of starting dialogue on many level. So, you know, every day we were getting like a different kind of reaction. Some were running away. We heard that some...
One of my friends actually, they also ran away, I think. One of my friends, she second, because she came during the exhibition at night time, I think. And then the shouting of your media got them away. I think two of my friends got scared and then, yeah.
What is the ethics of engagement today in works of art? And tell us about where the work is today. How does it rest?
Right now, I haven't spoken to Irina or Sonam, so I don't know where we collectively stand. But I know if we have something in that we would like to work on, I know we will come together again, I'm sure. But working on my body and the issues around it is very important. And I thought when that finished in 2018, I thought that was that. Now I move on to another. But now I'm still working on it. I realize, and it's gonna be a while that I keep on working on this. I realize now. So I have been doing that, and I have been analyzing and understanding where I need to go. And recently I just did work, and it dealt with, I wanted to work on my food eating disorder, which is connected to the body itself. So I'm working on that. And
like as Keepa said, I think I view this as something that is always going to be there. And if either one of us comes up with some kind of idea that really speaks to all three of us, we will come together in.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like I think we're also taking some time off to reconsider, okay, what collaboration really is. Because when you do it at the first time, it's very fresh, it's very natural, and everything comes with this certain kind of energy, and it feels very fluid. How do you sustain this? And in terms of like the ethics of viewership,
I feel like we must be guided by the intuitions, the feelings, and at the right space and right time. So if we feel it's the right time, right period, we think, oh, we should do it. We have the energy, right? I think you are right. And then if we are in that kind of space thing, I think then that's where we get to grow up, and then we can tell story more, fluently and then more beautifully. So yeah.